So recently we watched the Sony State of Play, and at the end of that there was an announcement for Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade. Now I did a review and an analysis on that trailer, and since then some things have come to light. There's been an interview with TETSUYA Nomura, who is the director and concept designer for Final Fantasy VII Remake. He reveals a bit more about the trailer and the characters in that trailer. Also, I was so enticed in that DLC that I didn't realise that Square Enix announced 2 mobile games as well. They announced Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis and Final Fantasy VII First Soldier. So we'll talk about those as well today. But firstly, I want to give a shout out to Audrey. Look her up for anything Final Fantasy VII or Final Fantasy related. When anything comes out like these interviews, they'll always be done in Japanese, and Audrey translates them for all of us to read and understand. So thanks so much to her. So this is the interview that happened in February 2021, so before the announcement of Final Fantasy Remake Intergrade with Tetsuya Nomura. So if we have a look at what he said about Sonnen. So there's a question here saying, Yuffie and Sonnen have a joint battle together, what kind of battle is it? Nomura said, the battle system will be slightly different than Final Fantasy VII Remake. You will not be able to control Sonnen. The player will control Yuffie in battle instead. In tactical mode, you will be able to give commands to Sonnen though. As for new gameplay elements, Yuffie and Sonnen will be able to battle together. I hope you enjoy this slightly different battle system compared to Final Fantasy VII Remake. So in my review, I thought that we would be able to control Sonnen because we had that scene where Sonnen and Yuffie were apart. I thought maybe we played as Sonnen and we went our own way for a bit. Turns out we don't play as Sonnen, so maybe we go and follow Yuffie and then they come back. What that also means is that Sonnen won't be in the Final Fantasy Remake Part 2, which isn't really surprising. I was kind of surprised with this new character, and I thought, oh, we can control him, maybe he's probably going to be in Part 2. Now we've confirmed that we actually can't control him. He probably won't be in Part 2, almost definitely won't be in Part 2, he is in for this DLC. What Nomura also said is that Yuffie and Sonnen be able to battle together, so what we noticed was actually true, so you can give commands to Sonnen and actually do team attacks together. Whether they take that into the next game we don't know, but considering they're putting it into the DLC and fans are crying out for it, it looks positive that they will put that into the next part of Final Fantasy VII Remake, so that looks promising. Another question that was asked then was what kind of character is the new character Sonnen? So Nomura said, in Final Fantasy VII Remake we briefly touched upon the topic that Barret's Avalanche and the other Avalanche are 2 separate groups. Yuffie actually came to Midgar for materia, but she gets involved on a mission with the other Avalanche group. Basically, Cloud, Barret and co are doing their own thing with their Avalanche group while Yuffie and the others are doing theirs separately. That's the basic gist of the story. So as we talked about, we saw that new footage of Barret and Tifa coming back to Sector 7 and talking to Biggs, saying we lost Cloud. Cloud is now with Aerith. He crashed through the church and he's now with Aerith and going back to her home, and Barret and Tifa are doing their own thing in Sector 7. The next time we see any of them is Tifa when we see her in Wall Market going to Don Corneo, because some people came snooping around Sector 7. So they're all doing that, and during that Yuffie and Sonnen are in Midgar in Sector 7, and it seems like they meet up with a different Avalanche group. We saw when we were doing the Jessie side story that Avalanche came and saved them pretty much. The main Avalanche group attacked the base that we were in. So it's something we've not seen before in Final Fantasy VII, the OG, that there's another Avalanche group, and it's not just our little group that's called Avalanche. There's a bigger picture going on, and that's the other group is what Yuffie and Sonnen seem to be getting involved with in this DLC. The next thing I want to talk about in the Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade trailer is this guy. So, I had no idea who this guy was, mainly because I've not played Dirge of Cerberus. It's a third-person shooter, came out in 2006, set 3 years after Final Fantasy VII, and it follows a guy that we haven't met yet in the remake, so I'm going to I'm going to keep his name secret. That is a guy called Vice, who is the commander of Deep Ground. Deep Ground are a top secret military organisation which is owned by Shinra. Now, they first appear in the Final Fantasy VII sequel, Dirge of Cerberus, a game that I've never played, so I wasn't sure who they were. So in the same interview, Nomura has talked about Vice and how he's going to be incorporated into the DLC. So they asked a question, why did you choose Vice? Why did you choose that character? Nomura said, since the strongest character Sephiroth is already in the game, we wanted to have another formidable boss aside from Sephiroth, so we chose Vice. I personally am curious as to how a battle would play out for the first time with Cloud versus Vice. In fact, I even asked the team to add Vice as a secret boss ever since the PS4. They then asked, it seems like the battle with Vice is done in the Shinra Battle Simulator, but will he be present in other parts of the story as well? What will his battle be like? Nomura said, in regards to details about Vice, all I can say is please wait for more information. They also asked, there will be a new boss in the DLC, but is that character going to be different than Vice, such as another character from the compilation perhaps? Nomura answered, the new boss character in the Yuffie DLC story is different than Vice. As for who else will appear aside from Vice, well, please wait for more information to find out. So in the trailer it did look like Vice was in the battle simulator, and we've seen in Final Fantasy Remake that the way they're directing this, they want to include every bit of Final Fantasy VII. That's why you had the Shinra soldier mention about Kunsel, who was a guy in Crisis Core. I didn't realise that Kyrie was actually another character in another game. And also the guy that I can't remember his name that works for Don Corneo, he's also a character in another game. They're actually not just fresh characters, they're all dotted around in this Final Fantasy VII universe. So it makes sense that Vice would be included in the battle simulator. He also got asked directly if Vice was going to be in any other part apart from just the battle simulator. And Nomura said, please wait for more information. So he might appear outside of the battle simulator. Maybe Vice is just a battle simulator boss and he appears somewhere in the DLC just as a character and you don't fight him. So the final thing I want to talk about with Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade is Nomura was asked about future parts. The last thing that Nomura said was this. So he was asked, since your work with Final Fantasy VII titles will not change much, you're also focusing on other titles too, right? We look forward to those. With the announcement of 3 new titles, can you please say a few words to fans who are also anticipating the next Final Fantasy VII Remake installment? Nomura had this to say. In order to make the game compatible with PS5, there's a lot of things happening in all directions that we had to sort through. However, our staff are incredibly dedicated and made it in a very timely manner. We'd like you to first enjoy Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade. In regards to the title Intergrade, the original Final Fantasy VII was called Final Fantasy VII International for the improved overseas version, so it pays homage to the original title. The word Intergrade has the meaning of being a middle, which serves as the midway point between Final Fantasy VII Remake and the next installment. It also means to move, which is a nod to moving to the new PS5 system and to the next installment. We have also included a new DLC episode revolving around Yuffie, and there's content within that you can't miss. Vice is a formidable opponent in the battle simulator. This is why I was so shocked in the reaction trailer to Final Fantasy VII Intergrade. When we first got announced Final Fantasy VII Remake back in 2015, we heard nothing for 4 years. From their first sort of trailer to the game releasing was pretty much around a year. So in my head, I imagined that obviously nothing was going to be said for the first year. So 2020 to this point, really, I imagined nothing was going to be announced. I was hoping they'd announce something this year, but after I've heard people talking saying they wouldn't imagine anything's going to be talked about this year, I was expecting the part 2 to come out in 2023 and hear the first thing in 2022 about the next part. So then bringing out a DLC just over a year after the release of the remake, I was really surprised. It's a nice way to introduce a new character that we were going to come across later in the game. I'm just so surprised that they've decided to bring out a DLC and that we're not waiting just for the next part and waiting a few more years. It's really nice that we had the the remake last year, we've got the DLC this year, and then next year, hopefully that's when they'll start showing us trailers, and then I imagine them releasing it in 2023. For now though, massively looking forward to this. I already have my PS5 and one of the lucky ones, so as soon as this gets released, I'll be updating Final Fantasy VII Remake, playing on that, and playing the new DLC. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was one of the mobile games that Square Enix is releasing. It's releasing this year in 2021. It's Final Fantasy VII The First Soldier. It's a mobile battle royale game made by Square Enix about Final Fantasy VII. So a quickly look at the trailer for it. So set 30 years before the events of Final Fantasy VII. It's about becoming the first soldier, really. It doesn't look too bad, the graphics look alright, and it would be interesting to walk around the areas in, like that's Aerith's house, walking around that area. You go around Sector 7, things like that. I don't think it's going to be fantastic. You tell me, oh that's the church. You tell me a mobile battle royale game that's really hit it off. The interview that we had with Nomura does mention a bit more about this game, so we'll have a look at that in a second. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see all these different areas. It's not a game that I'm particularly looking forward to. It being on mobile phone, I don't know if I'll end up playing it. I may do if it turns out to be alright. I may give it a go, but I'm not a massive fan of battle royales as it is, let alone battle royales that are on mobile phones. We'll have a quick look at what Nomura had to say about it in the interviews though. So quickly it says that you noticed there were monsters there. There was the Scorpion Sentinels, a cutter. Nomura said it's all part of the soldier training. They have to undergo various situations to experience realistic battles, and when asked if it was if you were going to be on your own or in teams, he said there are solo and trio battles, and the winner is the last person or the last team remaining. Pretty similar to any battle royale. Again, it comes out in 2021, so not a game that I'm particularly interested in. I'm more interested in the next game we're going to talk about, but it may be fun. I may give it a go. We'll see what it's like when it's released. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is something I'm really excited for. It's Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. It's a new remake of pretty much everything to do with Final Fantasy VII. They're even remaking a movie into a video game. I know it sounds crazy, but I'll show you what they're talking about. Let's watch the trailer for it. So it's another possibility for a remake. So this is the original Final Fantasy VII OG, but remade again with better graphics. This looks really good. Look at this design in a second. Look at that. That is phenomenal. I love that they're doing this. We'll read through some of the interview with Nomura. Actually talks about this as well, so I'll read through that. But again, it looks like it's going back to the old ways with it. It's no voice acting, but it's written on the screen like it was in the OG. But with this art here, it makes it look fantastic. Sort of like Hades looking. Also, it's a bit of a mixture of the Final Fantasy VII Remake in the battles, but then Final Fantasy VII OG in the story, sort of that top-down view of everything. It's crazy that they're making this whole game again in a remake. They've done it they've done it with Final Fantasy VII Remake, and they're remaking it again to look like this. That's interesting as well. You've seen Aerith there battling the Scorpion Sentinel. She's not obviously there in the original. You don't get her till much later on. Leviathan. It's like Final Fantasy VII Remake graphics for a mobile game. So this Ever Crisis is going to be a remake of all these components: Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VII Advent Children, which is a movie, Before Crisis Final Fantasy VII, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII, and Dirge of Cerberus Final Fantasy VII. Before Crisis is a prequel to Final Fantasy VII. It takes place 6 years before Final Fantasy VII, and it follows the Turks, so Rena and Rude, their organisation, against Avalanche as a group. So not Barrett's Avalanche, the actual Avalanche group. And it was a mobile game released in, I think it said 2006. I've never played it, so I'm really looking forward to playing that. If they've released the whole game, if they released each part like they just showed Final Fantasy VII like that, I'm looking forward to this so much. I think it's so clever of them to bring it out on a mobile phone with this level of graphics. It's fantastic, because I have never played any of those. I've seen Adventure and I've played Final Fantasy VII, the OG, never played Before Crisis. I've not played Crisis Core, but I know the story of it, and I've never played Dirge of Cerberus. So I'm so happy that they're remaking that, because I can't wait to play Crisis Core. And there's a bit left of this trailer. We'll quickly watch that, because I believe it shows some of Crisis Core. So again, exactly the same graphics as Final Fantasy VII OG, but again, it comes out in 2022, but still looking forward to that so much. So yeah, they're asked, will the story of Final Fantasy VII be presented chronologically, or will the story from Final Fantasy VII Before Crisis leading up to Dirge of Cerberus be rebuilt specifically for Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis? NOMURA said, "You will not need to play each title in its entirety before the next. Rather, each title will have its own chapters that you can select and play. Think of it more like a chronology of Final Fantasy VII. In regards to the chapters, will the stories be added as new updates?" NOMURA said, "That's right, new chapters will be added every month." So we know about it being coming out in 2022, and NOMURA has mentioned that it's coming out chronologically every month. So there'll be chapters every month, and like I said, you won't be playing Final Fantasy VII and then Advent Children. It'll be chapters from each of the games as it happens chronologically in the story, the whole story. So like I said, really looking forward to Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis, looking forward to getting stuck into Before Crisis, Crisis Core, Advent Children as a game, and Dirge of Cerberus. Really looking forward to getting stuck into those and really thoroughly understanding this Final Fantasy VII world. I'm a massive fan of Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy VII Remake is my favourite game of all time. The OG is my second favourite game of all time. Looking forward to getting involved in more Final Fantasy VII. That's what I want to see. So I'm so glad they're remastering all of the series in a game. That is phenomenal. Looking really forward to that. It's a shame 2022, but like I was saying earlier, we've got the DLC this year, Ever Crisis next year, and possibly the year after that it may be part 2. So next few years, really looking forward to. We've got so much Final Fantasy VII stuff to look forward to. So happy with it. One more shout out for Audrey. I used a lot of her stuff today. I purposely didn't go over all of it because I think you should go to her to view it. She posts loads of stuff about Final Fantasy VII. She constantly does it. It's a fantastic Twitter account. Thanks to her. And yeah, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like on this video and subscribe to my channel. There's a subscribe button just down there, and I'll see you on my next video.